Spectroscopy is the science of measuring specific spectrums of energy and spectroscopy includes many different ways of doing kind of the same thing. What I'm saying behind that is the analytic tools to look at the information and the data has a lot of comparisons. You can turn the tools loose on the information that a spectrometer might give you, because all the spectrometer is giving you is numbers that need to be interpreted and presented. So some software does that for you. So in this spectroscopy thing, the history of it goes back to somewhere after the invention of we invented fire. Somewhere along our deep history of use of fire. That's how far back this word goes. The word wasn't invented back then. They didn't realize it led into things like alchemy and other sciences. But it was that sitting around the fire and burning things and poking in the charcoal that made us maybe think about firing pottery. How many fires did you poke and you find a remnant, a clinker down in the bottom of a nice campfire that's been burning for weeks? Who does that? Yet that's how some of these things began. So the reason that, besides professional expertise in this field, I was looking at the history of the periodic table developed by Mendeleev back some long time ago. And in learning about how he put it together, how he came across this, there were references to his work with Madame Curie. And she was working with a material called pitchblende that came from Africa and had nuclear properties that we were just beginning to learn how to describe. These were things that Tesla kind of had a notion of. He knew that these things were there but didn't know how to describe them, didn't have the tools to measure them, but he was trying to talk about them and their potential. To my research, this is the plodding history of what we know, not about that individual, because lots of people were doing this. So anyway, Mendeleev had a lot of interactions with people doing this spectroscopy thing. I mentioned it was looking at a campfire. It started there. But it's actually, yeah, it started there, looking at the campfire. But as we got closer to fire, as we learned more about something that already existed, learned how to use it and what it means to us, heat and temperature itself changes objects. It turns a mushy clay pot into a nice sturdy bowl that holds liquids and foods. It preserves foods. It keeps bugs out of foods. You can store your grain in a large vessel and not worry about weevils and mice getting into it. The first attempt at a refrigerator when they didn't have the word, right? Food preservation. So this spectroscopy thing, this looking at the campfire, people saw that the colors of the flames from the campfire changed depending on if they blew on it. So they invented a bellows. They saw the color of the flames change with the type of wood and bark on the trees. They checked their cell phones and Googled why the colors those lights come from. Some of them saw rainbows and wondered at the marvel of what could form a rainbow and attributed it to reasons that were valid in the day. Now we understand pretty well what forms a rainbow, the amazement of it in itself. So this spectroscopy thing, this study of what we can sense and feel. So we learned light has a range. It has a range of colors. After more looking with these techniques of analysis from looking at light, we went into the chemistry because we stared at the campfire and knew there was something subtly different in the barks of those trees. Subtly different in that bellows that I have no idea why I really made other than it makes the campfire real cool. All of a sudden clinkers start turning up in the bottom of an old campfire. Or the clay you left by the campfire got heated up and you noticed how resilient, so next time you pack it in more clay. Then the next time you put the clay inside of something so it's not touching the fire and the coals. So you got a lot of time on your hands. If you aren't running away from tigers and lions and bears, if you aren't hunting to survive, your spare time isn't on the internet. So this is how we got here, sitting around the campfire and conversing. And out of that came spectrometry. Out of that word didn't exist came analysis of time and change over time. Came the understanding of things that depend on one another in order to be complete. Things that influence one another. So pressure influences temperature, or temperature influences pressure. And to some people, the fascination made the refrigerator that works today and the electricity. So this long, slow, plodding, methodical build of knowledge and understanding, this continued improvement in the world around us, or perceived improvement for our own comfort anyway, been going on a long time. This spectroscopy, this analysis, this delta, this change over time. So light was the first thing that we began to look at and use this spectrum, the colors of visible light. Later we learned that light is only emitted from an electron collapsing from a specific element or compound. A detail that's just fascinating and fascinated somebody long before me. Then they learned about it, and they wondered, and they added more onto it, and they improved it. The missing word here is improvement versus destruction versus, there's things we can't turn off. We have to do better. Have to. There's not a choice in this. There you are.